peace. I mean, we haven't supported peace since Trump met with Zelensky on August 18th. There's been not a single thing that Trump has done on the road to peace with Russia since that moment. You know, what Rubio fails to talk about is the chief obstacle to peace isn't Vladimir Putin, it's Volodymyr Zelensky.
Prove to me that you are alive.
Okay, welcome everyone to Prove to Me That You're Alive podcast. I am your host NazareN. I'm gonna skip all the intros today because we have a lot to get to today. Of course, today we have I'm humbled to say a dear friend of the podcast. Of course, he's the former president of Task Force and National Homeland Security, former U.S. Army Combat Arms and HQ staff officer. Of course, he's a military historian. He's a geopolitical expert, and I have to say, from a personal standpoint, one of the most important voices of the times that we are in right now. So of course I'm talking about the one, the only, the always cool and very effective Mr. David Pyne. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Nazare. Thanks for having me on your show again.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming back. I of course want to get into what you've been up to, because I think what you've been up to is always important. Obviously, you're constantly, trying to tell the world, tell Americans what's going on. You have amazing articles that you put out. You're always doing these various shows. So I want to get into what you've been up to, because again, it's very important. But we have a lot of things that happened during the time that we haven't spoke. And some people will say I might be a little late on the news, but I think that it's very important to what's going on today. A lot of people are confused. A lot of people don't know what's going on. I want to ask you about the meeting in Anchorage with President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And the reason I want to ask you about this, because I want to ask you from a historical standpoint, what did this mean for the world history? What did this mean for the time that we are living in? And was this all a political theater? And now we are kind of seeing that there are no results from that meeting. So if you could take me back to what you were thinking at the time the meeting was happening, how important is this historically, and was it all just smoke and mirrors?
Sure, yeah. President Trump has had two serious attempts to end the war. One was the 22-point Kellogg peace plan, which was released in late April and transmitted to Russia in early May, and then the summit. Of course, Trump had said repeatedly that the war would not end until he met personally with President Putin for the first time in 6 years to try to negotiate an end to it. And based on his press conference, he said that they were in full agreement, with the exception of maybe one or two major points, without which they would have had a deal. I think those points were probably Russia's demand for the rest of the Donbass region, which is an additional 1% of Ukraine's territory, and probably Russia's demand that Ukraine give up all of its long-range strike offensive weapons, including missiles, drones, and F-16 aircraft. And other than that, I think there would have been a deal announced at that meeting. And Trump essentially supported Putin's demand for the return of the Donbass region. That was reported both before and after the summit. He met with Zelensky at the White House the following Monday. The summit was on a Friday. And Zelensky and EU leaders, they all vetoed his peace deal. And instead of Trump using America's diplomatic captain saying, "Too bad for you. We're signing the deal with or without you. You're either with us or against us." He meekly decided to accept the veto, and then the following day approved the sale of 3,550 ERAM air-launched cruise missiles to Ukraine. So he's, instead of pulling the U.S. out of Ukraine, the Ukraine war, as he promised he would, with some kind of separate peace agreement, which is what I've been advocating with Russia, he has decided to escalate the war against Russia with all these long-range missiles, potentially including Tomahawk missiles, which are, of course, nuclear capable. And, he's on a glide path to starting World War III with Russia.
It's a little scary that you say that. So again, I want to kind of stand on the whole for a little bit on the whole meeting in Alaska, because what did you think of the way Putin was met in Alaska? And I'm going to tell you why I'm asking you this, because we seen the first time when Zelensky was in Oval Office with President Trump and didn't go so nice. But then Putin comes and it seems like the red carpet is out. The jets are flying above. I mean, this is a celebratory, sort of meeting. Did you think there was anything behind that? Like, because a lot of people are saying that there's something going on with Trump and Putin behind the scenes that we don't know about. Like, what did you think of the way that Putin was accepted that day?
I think overall Trump did a great job of welcoming Putin. He viewed him as an old friend. I mean, you could see the way, way they shook hands, held hands. He was mostly respectful. The only thing disrespectful he did is he surprised Putin with the B-2 overflight, buzzing the joint base above them, and Putin took that in stride. He looked up and with the loud streaking noise, and then he smiled, knowing it was just Trump being Trump. There wasn't a presidential honor guard. There wasn't the national anthems play. That's typically what you would see for a head of state from a nuclear superpower. But I thought that was okay. I think Trump. There was a body language expert I watched on YouTube, and he said there was no sign of Trump viewing Putin as an inferior. He clearly was viewing him as an equal. He wasn't trying to do any power moves on Putin. So, I think the meeting went well. I think Trump kind of walked back his offer to give the Donbass to Russia, although he did, try to persuade Zelensky and the EU to accept that. So I think he'd just been told by Rubio, who wormed his way into the meeting with Putin, which was supposed to be a one-on-one Putin Trump meeting at the beginning of the conference or the summit. Rubio got in there, and with I think it was Wickoff or someone else, but Rubio is kind of the neocon warmonger that's whispering in Trump's ear to urge him to do everything that's against America's national security interests and start all these new wars, keep fighting Biden's war. So I think that was what caused Trump to decide not to sign a peace deal with Putin at the meeting, and it's very unfortunate because based on what I've heard, we were 80 to 90% of the way there.
Thank you for that. There's so much talk and so much confusion. I do want to play you a clip of Mark Rubio at the General Assembly, UN General Assembly. But I first want to ask you, and I'll put my 5 cents in. Obviously, I'm in communication with people in Ukraine and in Russia. And obviously, people of Donbass, as you mentioned, they can't even fathom the idea that region, even though it's not fully taken over by Russia, that it will at some point go back to Ukraine. Obviously, a lot of Ukrainians are screaming about the borders of 1991. to your assessment, how realistic is it even for the U.S. On behalf of Ukraine to be asking for any territory back from Russia?
Well, I think it's very realistic for the U.S. to demand Russia return the occupied territory in the Kharkiv, Sumy, and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The area of Mykolaiv Oblast that Russia has occupied, they're basically annexed to Zaporozhye, I think. So that's not recoverable. But any additional territory beyond that, maybe 500 square kilometers, is really ridiculous. There's no way Russia's going to give any of it back under any circumstances, and they've indicated that if we don't accept their generous offer of where Putin has dropped 2/3 of his territorial demands, giving up any additional territory in Zaporozhye and Kherson, then he's going to proceed to prosecute the war until Russia annexes all of Novorossiya as well, which includes Odessa, Mykolaiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kharkiv. So that's about 42% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. Currently, Russia's at 19%. They want 20. There's been, any credible military analyst or national security strategist would have to assess that another 1% of Ukraine's territory is not going to be a big deal. Now, the only reason that Zelensky has made a big deal about it is because it's in Donetsk, which is highly urbanized. It's an industrial region, and there's some fortified belts there. But it's not really as critical to Ukraine's security as they make it out to be, because Russia currently, this is according to Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief General Syrskyi, Russia has 3 times more troops inside Ukraine than Ukraine has troops. So Ukraine is down to about 233,000 troops. Russia has 700,000 troops. They have around 300,000 additional troops in their strategic reserve in or near the Ukrainian border. So they can use those troops to invade reinvade Kyiv Oblast from Belarus at any time. I think Belarus, the Belarusian border is about 60 miles north of Kyiv. They did it before. They surrounded Kyiv and forced Zelensky to, get ready to sign the Istanbul Agreement, which was only torpedoed because Putin made the foolish decision to withdraw Russian forces from all of northern Ukraine in advance of the signing of the peace deal on April 9th of 2022.
Okay. You are a military historian. You are a military expert. To all the people out there that might not understand, how big of a chance do you think there is that Russia would be interested in going further beyond onto the other side of Dnipro into western Ukraine and possibly eastern Poland?
I think there's no chance that Russia wants to do that. There's no chance that Russia wants to go beyond Novorossiya. That's what Russia's repeatedly stated would be the absolute limits of their territorial ambitions in the event that Zelensky and Trump, continue to refuse peace with Russia. But of course, Mykolaiv and Odessa are on the right bank of the Dnipro River, and would, of course, if Russia were to annex both of those regions, Ukraine would be a landlocked rump state, which would be, much less economically viable than it is today, even with just one major port in Odessa. So, all the folks, I continue running into folks who are claiming that Putin wants all of Ukraine. Even Trump has stated that. It's a stupid claim. There's no evidence for that. Or even that Russia wants to retake control of Central and Eastern Europe, as they controlled following the Yalta Agreement after World War II, when FDR and Churchill meekly and cravenly surrendered half of Europe to Soviet communist enslavement for nearly half a century.
Yeah, and I'm gonna bring this all around. I'll connect the dots, I promise. But in 2022, when I seen something that I thought I would never see in America, freedom of speech, really got hit. So during that time, important voices came out. People like Jeffrey Sachs, Scott Ritter. Huge shout out to those guys, and obviously David Pyne. You were one of these very critical voices. Against the agenda and the brainwash of what was really going on. So this is why your expertise really matters into what I am about to ask you is because I've seen a lot of people before President Trump got elected, they were on his side, screaming MAGA and everything. You're one of these people that have never backed down from President Trump. You have always stood by President Trump. You have always had positive things to say. You've always kept faith in President Trump. So coming back to connect the dots. So the meeting in Alaska looks, beautiful, historic. A lot of people in Russia are excited. A lot of people in America are excited. And then we get what we get today with what you are mentioning. Zelensky comes back, the General Assembly, Marco Rubio. I do want to play you that clip, but before I play you that clip, I want to ask you this. And then President Trump making the statements he did about paper tiger and, all of these different claims about Russia's economy and everything. What is your assessment? Like, what the heck is going on? Is this all? I spoke to a Ukrainian journalist. He uncovered more than 2,000 corruption cases on Zelensky and the political elites over there. But what he's saying is that this is all this is all a political theater. This is a plot that Trump and Putin are putting together to destroy European economy and basically get rid of this whole Ukrainian problem while they're at it. So what is your assessment? Is President Trump having mental health issues? I'm sorry to say this. Does he know what he's talking about? Is this all a trick? Like, what is David Pyne's assessment on this?
Well, I predicted back in November of 2024 that Trump's decision to go with the Witkoff, or not the Witkoff plan, the General Kellogg's peace plan was going to be a non-starter. Russia stated way back in May or June when it was first released that it would be a non-starter. Putin would not accept that. What I predicted is that Trump would grow so frustrated with Russia's refusal to accept the plan that he would negotiate terms with Russia, and he actually he did that. He did that at the Anchorage meeting. He negotiated a better deal with Russia. I guess you could say a much better deal that was reasonable and that was had a high likelihood of success, at least in terms of Russian acceptance. But then there's no follow through. So we see what appears to be a bipolar Trump foreign policy. And I have been critical of Trump, actually, increasingly critical as he's veered towards the neocon side. In fact, I'm scheduled to publish an article about how Trump's morphed into a neocon president like Bush, Biden, and other folks like that, McCain even, when it comes to Russia and Iran. So, there's he just doesn't have follow through. He doesn't. He continues to listen to the misinformation that's fed him by Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, John Ratcliffe as CIA Director, Keith Kellogg as Special Envoy to Ukraine, and other bad actors within his administration and the senior ranks. And he's ignoring better advice from Vice President J.D. Vance, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. So that's the reason for his seemingly bipolar foreign policy, in which even sometimes in one day or from one day to the next, he'll say something really good, America first conservative, that pulling us out of wars, and then the next day he's massing naval forces and air refueling tankers near near Iran for a possible second strike. It's been very frustrating for me. I was really thrilled in the first few months of his administration. He seemed intent on fulfilling his promises to end the war in Ukraine. In the last 3 months, with the exception of the Anchorage summit, he's been going in the exact opposite direction. Being a worse president on Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Iran policy than even Joe Biden.
Yeah, you've been one of these people that, like I said, you've been pretty loyal to your stance on Trump. I'm very glad that you're saying that you've been critical, obviously, because you're one of these fearless people, I believe, but very important voices that we need to hear. So I want to play you a clip of Marco Rubio. You let me know if you can hear it well, and I want to get your assessment on this, because it's a part of what we're discussing right now. You just let me know if you hear it well. Here it is.
But the one that's proved to be an extraordinarily challenge has been the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine. The president has worked on it tirelessly, has invested a tremendous amount of his own time, energy, and the highest levels of our government. We have had meetings in Turkey, meetings in Saudi Arabia, meetings in Alaska, countless phone calls, doing everything possible to bring this conflict to a resolution and to an end. A war that cannot end militarily. It will end at a negotiating table. That's where this war will end. But the longer it lasts, the more people will die, the more will be destroyed. Some of the numbers we are seeing in the loss of life among military personnel, for example, on the Russian Federation side, are staggering. Staggering. In 1 month alone, more loss of life than in the entirety of the U.S. engagement in Afghanistan or Iraq. This war has to end, and we have done everything we possibly can, and will continue to do everything we possibly can to bring it to an end. Very generous offers have been made. For example, a ceasefire at the current lines of contact, while all the other details on the future of the conflict could be worked out in terms of future territorial lines. The president has shown extraordinary patience in terms of not assessing additional sanctions in the hopes of having a breakthrough in this regard. And all has come to what appears to be not just a stagnant one, but an era, and we've entered a period of what appears to be potential even escalation, with the historically highest number of strikes we've seen over the last few nights and before. And now we are also watching incursions into neighboring airspace by both drones and airplanes. The president is a very patient man. He's very committed to peace, but his patience is not infinite. And as he has said repeatedly, he has before him the opportunity and the options of imposing additional economic costs on the Russian Federation if necessary in order to bring this to an end. He also has before him the option, as he has already chosen to do in some circumstances, to sell defensive weaponry and potentially offensive weaponry so that Ukraine can defend itself from this assault by purchasing that weaponry. So I'm here to say to the Security Council, the United States remains as committed as it has ever been to a peaceful resolution to this dangerous conflict. But there will come a moment in which we will have to conclude that perhaps there is no interest in a peaceful resolution. And then the president has before him real options, which he intends to pursue, as he has made clear today in some of the messages he has put out. So I strongly urge the Security Council, the member states here, and those who are not part of this as well, to do everything in their power, and including the Russian Federation, to do everything within their power, and the Ukrainian side for that matter as well, but all sides, to bring this war to an end before it becomes something that will last another 3 or 4 years, lead to more destruction, both economic and at the same time a loss of life and loss of property and loss of futures. This war needs to end. But if it does not, if there is no path to peace in the short term, then the United States and President Donald J. Trump will take the steps necessary to impose costs for continued aggression. Thank you.
Sorry, were you able to hear that well, Mr. Pyne?
I was, yeah.
Okay, cool. So basically, what is your assessment? Because this was a pretty monumental moment. So first, he's talking about the losses on the Russian side. Obviously, he's talking about both casualties of war and economic losses and things like that. And then he's saying, more sanctions. And then he's saying, we're going to start selling these weapons to Europe, let Europe, sell it back to Ukraine. But the energy of this speech was that they're about to push Russia into something like this, that this is an escalation, not a de-escalation. What is your assessment of all of this?
Well, Rubio kind of speaks out of both sides of his mouth. He talks about, the U.S. is supporting peace. I mean, we haven't supported peace since Trump met with Zelensky on August 18th. There's been not a single thing that Trump has done on the road to peace with Russia since that moment. There's, what Rubio fails to talk about is the chief obstacle to peace isn't Vladimir Putin, it's Volodymyr Zelensky, because it's Zelensky that has refused to make even one single concession on the road to peace with Russia. I mean, I guess he said he'd be willing to freeze the lines temporarily in exchange for NATO membership. That's not a concession. That's more like an ultimatum that's unacceptable to Russia. But he's really hasn't given up his maximalist aims. He wants Putin tried in front of a international war crimes tribunal for war crimes Russia didn't commit. He wants $300 billion in reparations from Russia for a war that that Russia never wanted. That Zelensky, Trump has made clear multiple times, correctly stating that Biden and Zelensky provoked this war. If not for their provocations, Russia would never have invaded. And then he still refuses to recognize even Russia's annexation of Crimea, let alone parts or all the 4 oblasts. Zelensky's the main obstacle. Trump refuses to pressure Zelensky. All he'd have to do is say, if you don't sign the deal we negotiated in Anchorage on your behalf, we're going to cut off all U.S. military assistance, all intelligence assistance, and we're going to cut off Starlink access for Ukraine, and we'll let you guys, see how you do, outnumbered 3-1 against Russia as Russian tanks roll towards Kyiv. And the Ukraine military collapses. Because if all Russia would have to do to win this war, which they could do in just a few weeks, would be to mass 200,000 plus troops in Belarus, send those troops across the line into Kyiv Oblast, partially or fully surround Kyiv, and then the entire Ukrainian front would collapse on the left bank of the Dnipro River, because they only have 233,000 troops left, so they have to pull them all back to the west side of the Dnipro River to defend Kyiv against a Russian assault. So the fact that Putin doesn't want, he could have done that 2 years ago. He did do that at the beginning of the war. He pulled his troops out too early. He lost the chance to get the Istanbul Agreement. And then he's refused to authorize another Kyiv offensive. So Russia's had the ability to win this war, for years outright. But Putin has been satisfied with the 5 oblasts, leaving Ukraine with 19, and essentially destroying Ukraine's army to the point where Ukraine has suffered over 2.2 million casualties, as opposed to about 350,000 for Russia.
Thank you for that. And another big thing that happened was, and I believe this was on September 9th or 10th, if I'm not mistaken, was there was some air incursions by drones into the Polish territory, which is, of course, a NATO nation. There has also been a lot of talk, I don't know, you probably heard, unidentified drones in Denmark. But focusing more on what happened in Poland, because I thought that we were moments away from Poland invoking Article 4, is it, or Article 5 of the UN Charter. And so what was your assessment? Were these really Russian drones? Were these possible, false flag operation by Ukraine? And how dangerous was this moment?
Well, I think it was really overblown. I mean, certainly these were Russian drones. Certainly they were intentionally sent into Polish airspace. There were 19 reported Russian drones that invaded Polish airspace. They were unarmed, reconnaissance drones only. One drone into Romania, three MiG-31s flown over, Estonian islet that was located 25 kilometers from the Estonian mainland, and both Estonia and Poland were screaming bloody murder, invoking Article 4, convening a meeting of all of NATO's members, with the next step being Article 5, I guess. But they weren't. The fact is, they weren't attacked. This wasn't an active war, unlike Western technicians of targeting and firing off long-range missiles deep inside pre-war Russian territory. This was not an active war. It's this NATO has been essentially waging a war against Russia, and Russia, thanks to Putin being restrained and rational, he hasn't really responded in kind. But the longer we do this, the more that Trump continues to escalate the war and provide even more long-range missiles to Ukraine, the greater the chance that the next Russian targets will be Kyiv and Brussels with nuclear mushroom clouds exploding over those cities. Brussels, of course, being NATO headquarters.
Yeah, God forbid for that. You did talk about Putin's restraint, and speaking to people in Russia, obviously, a lot of people, with political positions and everything, they're telling me, well, look, when we went into Ukraine, this is sort of for us a civil war. These are our people, so we didn't go in there, for the lack of a better term, with guns blazing. You're a military historian, once again. And what we've seen in the military doctrine, at least for the past, 60, 70 years,
Prove to me that you are alive.
is that usually, just like in Iraq, we went in, there was heavy airstrikes for how many days, the same thing happened in Kosovo, and then the tanks roll in. So when this situation in 2022 was heating up, a lot of people said that, look, it will take a week for Russia to take over Ukraine. So you're also just mentioned that Russia could have ended this war. From a military strategic point of view, why do you think Putin and Russia, why are they taking this long in this conflict? Like, could there be a military strategic point, or did they make a bad decision in prolonging this for so long?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, on one level, the Russian military has fought, astoundingly well, inflicting 6.3 times more casualties on Ukrainian forces than on Russian forces. I mean, we haven't seen that. I mean, short of, the U.S. invasion of both invasions of Iraq, where we inflicted devastating casualties on the Iraqis, while suffering minimal casualties for our own. But it's also a mistake because, as I said, all Putin had to do was keep those Russian troops, partially surrounding Kyiv, and Zelensky would have had no choice but to sign the Istanbul Agreement, in which he would have, been forced to concede, permanent neutrality for Ukraine outside of NATO, just as was in line with, required by the Ukrainian pre-2019 constitution. And he also would have been forced to, reduce the size of Ukraine's army to half its pre-war active duty troops, as well as, greatly limit the number of tanks and artillery and aircraft and all the various weapon systems, and, limit the ranges to 40 kilometers, which is about 24 miles. But they would have had, they would have regained all of their pre-war territory with control of 93% of Ukraine's territory, as opposed to 81% today, and the lives of 2 million plus Ukrainian soldiers that have been killed and wounded since would have been preserved. So, Ukraine's lost 1/3 of its population since the war began. Most of those, of course, are refugees, but a shockingly high number are Ukrainian soldiers. Very few civilians, thankfully. Russia's been, Putin's been very careful not to attack civilians directly. I think the number of civilian dead is somewhere between 13,500 and 14,000, which is the daily death rate for Ukrainians in this war has been 6 times less than Palestinians in Israel's war against Gaza. So, the real war criminal isn't Putin; it's Netanyahu. But that's a whole different subject. Putin has, it's been a mystery to me why he withdrew those troops. He clearly wanted to, at the time, Russia stated that it was a gesture of peace. That Russia withdrew all its troops from Ukraine's 3 northernmost oblasts in Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy. Where Russia had taken control of 27% of Ukraine in an armored blitzkrieg in just the first few days and weeks of the war. So, if the Istanbul Agreement had been signed, again, Russian troops would have been completely withdrawn, and peace would have been restored. And that's something, of course, that Joe Biden and former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson desperately wanted to avoid. The longer this war goes on, as I predicted from the start, the worse terms that Ukraine will be forced to accept, and to the point where, of course, if their army collapses and they have to beat a fast retreat across the Dnipro River, they face losing 45% of Ukraine. And one last comment I wanted to make on this point is that you had asked, is there any chance of Russia taking all of Ukraine? And according to Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, there actually is. He stated in remarks just last week, I think it was on or about the 25th of April, he stated that if Ukraine didn't accept the generous deal that Russia offered at the Anchorage summit to Trump, those terms, then Ukraine would essentially cease to exist as an independent state. So that would infer that perhaps a Russian puppet regime would rule over whatever is left of Ukraine following the Russian annexations, or potentially Russia can annex all of Ukraine. But at least in terms of what Russian leaders have said, what the Russian foreign ministry has stated, they have not stated that there's any intent on the Russian side to take all of Ukraine.
A lot of people are calling the Russian economy a military economy. I know that I spoke with people in Siberia that live in a vicinity of like these military factories and everything. They're telling me that these factories are constantly working, 24 hours a day. They're just switching shifts and everything. That the country is really, in operation for this war. So I want to ask you, how do you assess, because I mean, you summed up, everything about the Russian military, but from the Russian economic to the Russian military side, how do you assess the Russian strength as of 2025, the 1st of October? How strong is Russia right now? How long can they keep this going if God forbid we do keep going?
So Russia has never been stronger since the fall of the Soviet Union. Thanks to Biden's war in Ukraine, they have increased military spending from 3% of GDP to 6.5%, which is a Soviet level that we haven't seen since the Cold War days. They've increased the size of their military from less than 1 million troops to 1.5 million troops. that again is that's a level that we saw at the beginning of World War II. That was the size of the Red Army in 1939. The Russian army is it's stronger than it's ever been. It's battle hardened. They have probably a million ground troops and associated ground forces. They have, according to Ukrainian Ministry of Defense top secret report that was leaked, they have 16,000 nuclear weapons. The U.S. has, if you count the partially dismantled weapons we have around 3,750. 1,500 of those would take up to 2 years to redeploy. So, they outmode us there in terms of, theater nuclear missile force or nuclear weapons. They have, I think, 50 times as many as we do. So they outmode us on that. They have super EAP weapons. They remain the world's premier tank power. So they have, many more main battle tanks than the U.S. has. U.S. and all of NATO combined. They spend more than on their military in terms of purchase power parity than all 30 European NATO nations combined. And they produce, in certain critical munitions, 4 times more than the NATO produces in a single year. So you're right. Their economy it's a war economy now. It's they've been engaged in mass production. Some up to 1,500 T-90M tanks a year. I think around 180,000 Garan 2 drones is their goal. I don't know if they're going to achieve that this year, but they're getting close. So they have massive reserves of forces in terms of tanks and drones and missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, to pummel Ukraine and if necessary to strike NATO as well.
Yeah, I heard it's cool that you mentioned that about drones, because I heard that Russia's putting out around like 2,000 drones a day. So if you're talking about 180,000 a year, I think we're in the same vicinity. So that leads me to the same question, but in regards to U.S., NATO, and Europe. How do you, because the point that I was trying to make is that a lot of to strike these drones, you need to use a lot of expensive American weaponry. So the same question, but on our side, how do you assess the strength of U.S., NATO, Europe, and Ukraine in this whole situation? How long can we continue this, even if we are selling these weapons to Europe? Europe is kind of either selling it or giving it to Ukraine, or I'll say to the Zelensky regime. How long can we still keep doing this? How do you assess NATO, US, and Europe's strength?
Well, the U.S. and NATO, pretty much gave all their spare weapons to Ukraine and then some. We've cut into the bone in terms of our, military requirements. The U.S. military no longer has sufficient weapons to fight a war against Russia or China, thanks to the decisions of the Biden and Trump, primarily the Biden administration. We can continue providing a low level of, arms and military support to Ukraine for quite some time. Russia can, continue fighting Ukraine at this rate indefinitely, but of course, Ukraine reports indicate Ukraine, only has enough infantry to deploy 1 to 8 troops for every kilometer of border in key areas of the main front in the Donbass region and Kherson and Zaporozhye. So Ukraine's military collapse is imminent. It's possible they could last into next year, but there's also a good chance we could see them collapse by November. Just later next month. I would wager that they could probably last until spring or summer of next year, but probably not beyond that, because they just don't have the troops. Again, 233,000 troops facing off against 700,000 Russians. All Russia has to do is deploy. If they were to deploy half, they could literally take half their troops, move them into Belarus, not even that. They could use their strategic reserves and another 150,000 troops, go into to Kyiv with 350,000 troops, and the war would be over within 3 weeks.
I don't want to keep you here for too long. I have a few more questions. But to wrap up this topic, and you just touched on it, but if I could get again, you're a military historian, you're a geopolitical expert. If I could get your best possible prediction on how this will play out, how the situation with Ukraine is going to play out in the next year to 2 years, how does David Pyne see this all going down?
Yeah, as I said, Ukraine's military collapse is inevitable within the next 12 months, probably closer to 6 to 9 months. Again, probably summer of next year would be, the absolute longest they could hold out. And, their own generals have stated, I mean, they stated, I think back in March, that they had maybe 6 months to hold out before they, run out of troops and weapons. And again, General Syrskyi, commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, has stated that Russia out overmatches Ukraine by 3 to 1, not only in troops but also in weapon systems. So across the board, tanks, artillery, rocket systems, missiles. Only in drones is Ukraine nearly on par with Russia, and even now Russia has gained the advantage over them. So the real risk isn't so much Ukrainian military collapse, which would potentially enable Russian troops to advance all the way to the Polish and Romanian borders. There'd be nothing to stop them if they wanted to do that. And, as Lukashenko has stated, that's on the table. Russia hasn't threatened that because they don't want that. But, if the Ukrainian army collapses, I guess why not? So if we want to, if that's what Trump wants for Ukraine, he wants Russian control of all of Ukraine. He's probably pursuing the best policy to do that, and that is to keep fighting the war and reject Putin's peace terms.
What are the chances? Because again, this Ukrainian journalist told me this scenario that in fact it is Trump and Putin behind the scenes. They're kind of plotting the economic end of Europe, and getting rid of the situation in Ukraine. How plausible is this idea even? Like, is this even a possibility that something is going on with Trump and Putin behind the scenes that we're not being shown as of yet?
No, I don't think that's a possibility. I mean, Trump's doubled down on his support of NATO. He had, previously stated during his first administration he wanted to get the U.S. out of NATO. He told his top advisors that on 2 different occasions, according to John Bolton in one of his latest books, former national security advisor. He's keeps boasting about NATO increasing their military spending to 5% of GDP. In fact, it's about 2.02% on average. They have committed, they pledged to implement that within the next 2 to 3 years. It's never going to happen. I can promise you that. Maybe, Poland's getting pretty close. I think Lithuania's at 3.5%, but the other NATO countries are never going to get 5%. The problem with Trump is he comes up with an idea, and he decides he starts claiming that it's already been implemented. So he did the same thing with regards to U.S. nuclear arsenal. He was briefed that the U.S. nuclear arsenal had been reduced from 22,000 nuclear weapons down to 3,750, again, including those partially dismantled warheads. And he went ballistic and said we needed to, increase the size of our nuclear arsenal by, 10 times. And then 2 weeks later, he said he already did it. He's like, oh yeah, I already rebuilt our nuclear arsenal 2 weeks after, saying it was way too small. Sadly, he's done nothing to rebuild our nuclear arsenal to date in those intervening years. Of course, there are 4 years of the Biden administration, but I think it's the same thing with regards to NATO. He wants NATO to be strengthened. He's talking about, pulling troops out of Germany, but redeploying them to Poland. I mean, that's a really stupid idea. We'd be better off having all our troops in Germany instead of Poland and the Baltic states. That's been a big beef for Russia. They've demanded as part of, previously, they no longer demand it anymore. But when we first met with them, Rubio and Lavrov, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov was saying that as the price of peace, we'd have to pull our troops out of Eastern Europe, and that's something we should have committed to, but Rubio adamantly refused to do so. So, we're not making a lot of progress on that. And again, we keep moving to World War III, and that's the real risk. Ukraine's collapse would be lamentable, but it wouldn't be the end of the world if Russia, advanced all the way to the Polish and Romanian border, because they have no intention to go any farther. They don't even want to go that far. The real danger is that, Trump's decision to keep sending long-range missiles, ERAMs, and maybe even, JASSMs and Tomahawks that are longer range that could hit anywhere inside of European Russia, all the way to the Ural Mountains, potentially for, assassination strikes or strikes on key military targets deep inside Russia, could provoke Putin to order the, cyber, kind of a massive cyber attack that could destroy all, not just, Europe, NATO, but also the U.S. homeland as well.
I remember you and I spoke right before the election results, the last election results, when President Trump won. We were all, very optimistic. Obviously, you have a much cooler head because you're assessing this from from a different point of view than, let's say, just a regular American. A lot of Americans are very disappointed, heartbroken with everything that's going on with Donald Trump. I know you have thought about this. I know that you have written about this, but if you would have a chance right now to advise President Trump on how to proceed with this possible escalation into World War III, Ukraine, Russia, what would you say to Donald Trump right now?
I would tell him to follow my proposal to sign a separate peace agreement with Russia along the terms that I wrote in an article on the Real War Substack at dpyne.substack.com earlier this month. And that would essentially be the, what Trump and Putin agreed to at the Anchorage summit, including Russia's demand for return to the rest of the Donbass region, which they currently control 88% of that region. Again, just 1% more of Ukraine's territory, increasing Russia's control, over Ukraine from 19% to 20%. Not a major difference. And then, of course, limiting the Russian or the Ukrainian armed forces to having no long-range strike weapons, giving up their F-16s, reducing their weapon range, down to 40 kilometers. That's and having BRICS peacekeepers to police the borders of Ukraine, the new borders with the four regions. I think that's a pretty good deal from the Ukrainian standpoint, and that satisfies Russia's minimum terms. And again, he could sign that agreement with Russia in a bilateral meeting, and then tell Ukraine and tell Zelensky to sign it, or else give up Starlink access, and he pull out all U.S. military advisors, all intelligence officers, and all weapons technicians, and whatever U.S. weapons we could get back from Ukraine to get out of this disastrous war that Biden got us into, and then Trump's continuing to fight and escalate very foolishly, in my opinion.
As always, I have like a million more questions for you, but I'm gonna get you out of here because I'm so I'm so very thankful for your time. So I have two more questions for you. You are a great American patriot. I've said this on the outside of the podcast to people that if David Pyne were to run for president, I would be on board all the way. Maybe we will see that one day. But what happened, the situation that happened with Charlie Kirk, I don't want to get outside of everything that we've been talking about, but to you, how significant was this tragedy, and where does that put America as far as unity or division? Like, how did you see this what happened with Charlie Kirk?
Well, I mean, it was really lamentable. I mean, Charlie Kirk was a great American. He was an America First conservative. He was a strong opponent of the war in Ukraine. He was an opponent of Israel's war in Gaza. So he was completely in line with the things that I believe in. And this assassination occurred about an hour away from where I live here in Utah. So it really struck home for us. UVU, Utah Valley University, is pretty conservative as Utah universities go. It's probably the most conservative in the state, and so it was really sad to see that happen here. It really highlighted the fact that we have left-wing extremists here in Utah, and the Center for Security Policy just published a 41-page report on Utah left-wing extremist groups, which I haven't had a chance to read. They just published it today. And so I think the Charlie Kirk assassination had two major effects. One, it exposed the extent of Antifa, far left trans terrorist groups here in the U.S. and what a danger they pose. And there's been so many left wing shooters, mass shooters, trans terrorists, Antifa, extremists. It all started with the George Floyd riots, and May 30th of 2020. They tried to assault the White House and lynch Trump and the first family and overthrow the U.S. government. So that was the first insurrection that preceded January 6th. We know that January 6th, of course, there were 275 FBI undercover operatives that tried to incite violence to give Biden an excuse to crack down on conservatives, mostly peaceful conservatives, and ignore the rising threat from left-wing terrorists. But it's also caused, America First conservatives to rally towards their faith, their Christian faith. We know Russia is a Christian country, the U.S. is as well, and we need to unite in what we have in common. But both here in the U.S. internally, but also with Russia, to establish a just and lasting peace in Ukraine.
I'm so sorry. I don't want to look like a liar, but this question just came up. So just literally two last questions. But as far as Charlie Kirk goes, there's a lot of rumors that possibly Israel had something to do with that. I just want to know your opinion. What do you think about that?
Well, there's a lot of credible sources that are saying that the Israeli Mossad, of course, has a pretty strong record of assassinations. Netanyahu orders assassinations at his whim. Whether it's Hamas peace negotiators or Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders or Hezbollah, Houthi leaders, just left and right. But it's very uncommon that he would, order these assassinations on U.S. soil. I don't know of another instance of that happening. I don't believe there was any Israeli link to the assassination of JFK, for example. So it would be very extraordinary for him to do so. But Charlie Kirk was going off the rails against Israel, and exposing Netanyahu is potentially corrupt, potentially ordering a stand down for Hamas terrorists to inflict maximum deaths against Israeli civilians on October 7th, 2023. And then, of course, he was exposing Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, the leader of the sex ring scandal, in which 1,000 girls were molested or raped. Most of them underage, as an Israeli Mossad honeypot operation to blackmail U.S. and other leaders, UK leaders, Prince Andrew, of course, and others, to do Israel's bidding. And Trump, of course, we know is on the Epstein list. There's no evidence that he, committed any sexual assaults against the girls, but he was good buddies with Epstein, even though he denies it today. There's quite a few, pictures of him with them. So There is, credible possibility that Israeli Mossad agents had infiltrated the Antifa green Discord channels that the assassin Tyler Robinson was kind of radicalizing him and helping him plan the assassination. It was a conspiracy, I believe, but there's just no hard proof of that. It's pretty circumstantial and really not even that. So clearly, Netanyahu had motive to kill Charlie Kirk, but I've seen really no hard proof that that's the case, and so it's just pure speculation at this point.
I really appreciate it, Mr. Spine. I just said Spine. Why did I think it's Mr. Pyne? I'm gonna cut that part out. That was very embarrassing. Mr. Pyne, I am so thankful to you. Again, you are a great friend. You're always a voice of reason. This is always very insightful, very educational. So my last question to you, and this is as important as everything that I asked you before. What has David Pyne been up to lately? What should we be looking out for in the coming time? And is there any chance that my dreams will come true and you will run for a major political seat?
Yeah, so thanks for that. I'm afraid my political career is over. I ran 3 times for state senate in New Mexico. I would have won that race, but I decided to move out drop out of the campaign because the New Mexico State Senate is a Democrat, has been for a century. There's no prospects of ever switching it back to the Republicans. So I would have had a great title, but not a lot of influence, not a lot of bills getting passed. I also ran for county council and city council in Salt Lake County. But at this point, I'm just happy. I've worked on campaigns, as you're aware. I worked as Vivek Ramaswamy's defense and foreign policy advisor. I was interested in advising Trump as well, and I was successful in getting one of my Ukraine war peace plans to a member of his cabinet. There's no evidence that Trump ever saw it, but at least I know that one of his top national security officials did see it and check it out. Again, I'm happy just to help out and provide the advice on matters of national security to President Trump and other U.S. leaders to make a difference in that way. I'm currently working on a couple articles about how Trump is, transmorphed into a neoconservative president on foreign policy, as well as an article analyzing his Gaza war peace plan, which I think has a lot of good elements, but is perhaps very unlikely to be approved by Hamas in its current form. So that's what I'm working on. I'm also working on a book that I want to see titled "Restoring Strategic Deterrence." That may come out as early as the end of this year. It's possible it could be delayed. My co-author has had a lot of issues, in her personal life that's delayed it by several months. But that's going to look at the Russian and Chinese nuclear threats and the U.S. nuclear arsenal and what we can do to strengthen it.
Listen, Mr. Pyne, on behalf of a kid that was born in Ukraine, on behalf of a American patriot that I am, I want to thank you on behalf of all Americans. I want to tell you that even though, you said politically, maybe I'm still keeping hope. Maybe something will happen and you will run for office. But I just want to let you know that regardless, your voice is very necessary. You are very impactful. I don't know if you know, but I've translated our parts of our conversations into Russian. Those clips and videos have gotten a significant reach. I have a whole other channel for that. A lot of people commented in Russia, in Ukraine. As you know, about 75% of Ukrainians speak Russian anyway. So a lot of people are very thankful for what you are saying. A lot of people are saying that your voice is very refreshing. You're bringing back a lot of faith in America, in people, in Russia and in Ukraine. So I just want to tell you, God bless you. Keep doing your thing. You are a national treasure to us. And we will gladly welcome you back. So thank you so much, Mr. David Pyne.
Thanks, Nazar. You're a great patriot as well. I appreciate your kind words.
Thank you so much, sir. God bless you. We'll talk soon, all right?
Prove to me that you are alive.